It's been a year now since the release of The Last Jedi, and no matter what my personal opinion on that movie is, I've always found the discussion and the love-hate relationship people have with it to be ultimately fascinating. And this is because of how it holds up the fanbase over in such a way that no Star Wars movie has ever done so before. This is because there are people out there who consider The Last Jedi to be, in their opinion, the best Star Wars movie of all time. But at the same time, there are of course people on the opposite side of the spectrum who see it as the very worst Star Wars movie. And if you think about it, this is what really makes The Last Jedi stand out. As, let's be honest, you can't say the same thing about any other Star Wars movie out there. I mean, let's just think about it for a second. The Phantom Menace. A movie with its fair share of problems, sure, but far from the best or worst for most people. Attack of the Clones. Usually considered one of the weakest of George Lucas's 6 movies, but at the same time, no one really hated it or loved it. Revenge of the Sith. A fan favorite from the prequels that receives plenty of love, and many prequelists consider it to be the best Star Wars movie. But you'd be hard-pressed to find anyone who had anything awful to really say about it. Rogue One: A Star Wars Story. Overall, positively received, but it did have a crowd who didn't care for it. A New Hope. The original that started it all, yet it is often seen as dated by the younger generation. The Empire Strikes Back. The mainstream favorite for a majority of original trilogy fans, and not an episode you'll often find anyone really trashing. Return of the Jedi. While not the strongest of the original trilogy, it's still well received due to its climactic series of events. And those who didn't like it for the Ewoks will have a hard time to use that as justifying it as the worst episode of all time. The Force Awakens. The episode that opened up Star Wars to a whole new generation. And even for its faults as being a knockoff of A New Hope, it's uncommon to find people who absolutely hated it. I'm obviously the exception here. Solo: A Star Wars Story. Those who did end up seeing it at the cinema either liked it or found it boring, kind of just meh overall. But nowhere near bad enough to really hate on it. So, out of every Star Wars movie out there, you'll never find one that has such a division amongst it, where a large chunk of fans thought it was the best Star Wars movie ever, while another thought it was the absolute worst. And what makes this all the more fascinating is that the thing is, this was all intended by director Rian Johnson, whose plan all along was to subvert expectations and create a film that would be loved by some and hated by others.
I would be worried if everybody across the board was like, yeah, that was a good movie. It's much more exciting to me when you get, a group of people who are like coming up to you and really, really excited about it. And then there are other people who walk out literally saying that was the worst movie I've ever seen. Having those two extremes to me is the mark of the type of movie that I want to make.
And no matter what your opinion on the guy is, you have to admit that in the end, he succeeded in doing just that. As a result, we have a Star Wars movie that will forever generate endless discussions, debates, and even heated arguments. Hate it? Love it? It doesn't matter. It'll always stay relevant in the Star Wars conversation, and that is what Johnson intended to do. Now, whether that is a good thing or not, well, guess what? That's up for debate. This is N7 from Silo, signing off.